1874 Preview Show.
Hello, welcome to the 1874, not the 1874 podcast. That's not what we're doing at all. The 1874 preview show with myself.
Solid start.
Yeah, it's a brilliant start. I'm your host, Dan Bardell, talking absolute rubbish at the start, joined by my good friend, David Reed. Do want to just start with something that I've literally just seen on Twitter before we're about to come on, and it's a villain in Idaho who's just tweeted, "My last ever game this weekend. I've been told it's highly unlikely I will make another game. It's been a pleasure meeting you guys on here. It's been wonderful to be able to connect with other fans. Whilst dying, though, I know Villa is in safe hands. Look forward to meeting you all one day." Look, there's nothing I can say other than just what a brave person tweeting like that. I've seen that Stan Collymore sent him a lovely tweet before we've come on as well, and it's really saddened me, to be honest, as I'm about to come on. But it does show like the great side of Twitter, that a villain in Idaho has made so many connections and so many friends on Twitter, and been able to spread his love of Villa and speak to so many people that love Villa as well. So everyone that's going to the Burnley game this weekend, I'm sure, will want Villa to get 3 points for you, and hope that Villa can win if it does end up being your last game, and just sending all my best and all my love to Villa in Idaho. It's really saddened me as we've come on. So also enjoyed the fact that he put PS, "Fuck you, Kevin Friend. I hope you have a shit day" at the end, carrying some resentment at Kevin Friend for that Crystal Palace Henry Lansbury decision. So clearly still got your sense of humour. So yeah, just wanted to raise awareness of that tweet. As I say, literally seeing it just as I'm about to come on, and just many Villa fans as possible can give Villa in Idaho their love. I'm sure you'll have all seen the tweet now because of Stan Collymore raising awareness about it. But yeah, give some love, and like I say, I'm at the game on Sunday, and I will now be thinking about you throughout. So yeah, horrible, Dave, but yeah, also just seeing the love that Villa fans can provide, and seeing how Villa can bring people together, I guess.
Yeah, you said it perfectly. We'll be thinking about them this weekend for sure.
Yeah. Right then, let's attempt to preview the game. I've mullered the intro, and then we've had that. So after a cracking start with my intro, Dave, what are you expecting this weekend? I guess the fact that Villa have played a day earlier than they were supposed to, and the fact that it was a stroll, in all honesty, against Burnley, and that's positive, carrying a bit of momentum now with 2 wins as well. And we haven't seen Burnley since day one. They haven't had a game for over 2 weeks now, so could be a decent time to face them at their place, bearing those things in mind.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the game in midweek felt almost like a pre-season friendly. It really was that easy. I wasn't expecting it to be quite that comfortable. I thought they were at least going to give us a little bit of a game, and it didn't transpire that way, and we were able to come through that pretty easily. And I think the players recovery-wise will be thankful for that when we get to Sunday. Not only playing the extra day early, but actually getting through that game fairly comfortably. There were a couple of tasty tackles in that game, which had me a little bit worried at a couple of different points in the game. But I think everyone coming through that, although of course we're not sure about Emi Martinez.
Not everyone, David. Not everyone at all.
I think it stands us fairly well going into this weekend. I wouldn't actually expect too many changes. Maybe Matty Cash coming in at right back, and everyone Konza shuffling over, and Pau Torres centre back, and Luca Dean left back. That's the only kind of changes that I can foresee, really, if Martinez is fit.
I mean, we've already lost a couple of key players this season. It's not a bad injury for Martinez. It's not something that's going to keep him out for the season or anything like that. But even losing him for one game, it does worry you, because look, Olsen, it is what it is. But every time he's played, pretty much, he's made a mistake. We do need to get behind him, and if it is him in goal on Sunday, everyone needs to absolutely get behind him. But it is a concern. And are you surprised that we haven't addressed the backup goalkeeper situation? Emery clearly has faith in him, doesn't he?
Yeah, look, it did surprise me that we haven't managed to get a new backup goalkeeper, but having said that, Unai Emery has had plenty of time to have a look at him, and he's had plenty of time now to change things if he wanted to change things. So things have obviously been seen that makes Unai Emery believe that he's capable of filling in if needs must. And if that happens this weekend, then you have to say that it's Unai Emery's choice, and you have to kind of trust what the manager's seen already and what he believes that Olsen is capable of. I mean, the eye test he probably hasn't passed so far, because you're right, when he has played, it's not been the most convincing performances. So it's up to him now to make it his own if he is given the shirt, and try and at least be a challenger to Emi Martinez. I don't think he obviously is anywhere near that level, which is a problem. And when it's such a significant change in level between your goalkeeper, number one and number two, sometimes it can be a problem with the way you want to play out and the way you want to do things. But having said that, I think I fully expect Emi Martinez to play.
Is there any ITK in that statement, Dave? Because he posted a picture on his Instagram earlier of his leg kind of bandaged up with ice on it. I'd be the same. You know, they said he was taken off as a precaution on Wednesday, but he hasn't trained today. I guess the proof will be in the pudding on Saturday. Obviously, one of Villa's best players will be a huge miss. I am surprised about goalkeeper, because I don't know how true this is, but I just heard murmurs about it at the start of the window, and it was what made me think that we would bring another goalkeeper in, that they were looking at getting Tom Heaton back, and then Man U activated the 1 year option they had on his contract. Like I said, that's not absolutely concrete. It was just something that I heard at the start of the window. So I fully expected us to bring a keeper in, and it hasn't happened yet. And you know, obviously it's not been a priority position. Getting a backup goalkeeper is the kind of thing that can be done quite late in the window, but it does always make the fans nervous when Olsen's in goal. Even in the Hibs game, I felt like straight away at the start of the second half, we'd automatically gone deeper. And I always just feel, because of his reluctance to come off his line, it does affect the rest of the defence, and it affects the way we want to play. Mind you, after the last away game, might be a good thing if we don't push us high up, Dave.
Nothing ITK on Martinez at all. I just think, look, I don't think Martinez would have played the game in midweek, but I think it's just purely my own personal opinion. But I think he would have been desperate to play that game as Villa's first game in Europe. Yeah. And so he's given 45 minutes. The game's done at half time, and he said, look, let's come off and let's try and save things. So I would expect him to be fit enough. If he's fit enough for the game on Wednesday, I would expect him to be fit enough for the weekend. It might just be something that they need to manage as we go on, or kind of wait to the international break and try and give him a bit of a rest there, although I'm not entirely sure what his plans are for the international break, to be honest. So,
I mean, if he's called up, he'll go, because that's just his character, and that's how much he loves Argentina.
Yeah, absolutely. But then it'll be down to kind of the Villa doctors and the Argentina doctors to then have a proper kind of look at him and pretty much take no risks if you possibly can. But yeah, I mean, there is a difference when Olsen's in goal. There's no doubt about it, because the defenders are turning around and they're seeing someone else in goal, and they, you know, as much as they've got full trust and full faith in Emi Martinez. Now things change when there's a different goalkeeper, and it's different body language from the person behind you. It's different calls, it's different shouts, it's lots of different things for defenders to cope with. So it is a change for them, and I think that does alter their mindset. I'm not sure you can get away from that argument. So it's just about how they cope if there is a change at the weekend.
That leadership void as well, if Martinez isn't there as well, when you've already got Mings missing from that back line, that's the two leaders of the defence gone, which I would find a concern in an away game in particular. I think now the sample size of looking at Burnley in the Premier League, there's not much we can do. They've played once, and it was against Manchester City at home, so there's very little for us to go on. Burnley, Premier League, Burnley under Vincent Kompany, but had an excellent season. He did so well to kind of build his own side in that first season and get them up playing a completely different brand of football, really high turnover of players coming in and moving out as well. And to be in fairness, he's continued that high turnover going into the Premier League season. They've signed an awful lot of players again, Burnley. You know, some of their big players that were big in the Championship last year didn't start in that first game against Manchester City. They'll be looking at this and thinking, this is our chance to start our season, really. Villa at home, they'll look at it as being a winnable game. One thing's for sure, about Company. I think he's the real deal. I would say that, especially from having watched the 4-part documentary on Sky. I would say this guy is going to go on and be a fantastic manager. It's just the way he talks about the game, the way he was even communicating with the board and the ownership. I just thought it was so impressive, the stuff he was putting across and the way he explained things. So he's the real deal. This is a very different Burnley to the Burnley that was last in the Premier League, and they're going to press Villa from minute one pretty much. Their Company's got his principles, and he isn't going to change them for anyone.
When they came up in the Championship anyway, you're right, there was a complete changeover, not just in player personnel, but in style as well. Obviously coming down from the Premier League, changing from Sean Dyche to Vincent Kompany. They played a much higher possession style football, much higher pressing. I think they had the lowest PPDA. So that means that they're a high pressing side in the Championship, high turnovers, and I think they're going to want to try and carry that on against Villa this weekend. I mean, last season they played 4 at the back, kind of a 4-2-3-1, which switched into a 4-3-3 often. And then the first game of the season against Manchester City, they actually started with a 5 at the back and almost traditional wing backs with Connor Roberts right wing back, and I think it was Vitinho left wing back. I think they are still looking as well for left backs. So I'm not entirely sure whether they believe Vitinho is going to be a bit better further forward than a traditional left back. So I'm interested to see whether they stick with the 5 at the back or whether they revert to kind of what they knew last season with a 4 at the back. Last season, Connor Roberts was the one who, when they were in possession, drifted inside to make a 2 holding midfielder double pivot. Kind of the Pep Guardiola inside, fullbacks coming inside. Connor Roberts was that one, coming in from right back, and then they had Ian Matson, who was the flying.
He's a big miss for them, isn't he? He was really good for them.
Yeah, he's obviously gone back to Chelsea, and he's part of Pochettino's plans at the moment at Chelsea. So they miss him. So I wonder whether they'll kind of stick with 5 at the back and use one of those centre backs to step out and step into midfield. Against Villa, but you're right. I think they will come at us from minute one. They'll go man for man, try and press us high in midfield as well, and they'll be trying to use the home crowd to lay down a marker. They'll have also probably looked at the Newcastle game and thought, you know what, these might be fragile if we get a goal, and if we can cause them a little bit of chaos like Newcastle did, then they might break down again. And I think that's what Vincent Kompany will be saying to Burnley players this weekend.
Yeah, it's interesting, the formation, because like you say, they didn't play 3 at the back, 3 centre-backs last season, and because they've only had that one game, that might have been a specific setup for Man City. We don't know whether that's their plan through the whole season at the moment, or whether they're just going to use it for certain games. But I think you're right. I do think they'll come at us hard at the start. I think he'll want to try and get the crowd on side early, Vincent Kompany. I think home form's obviously going to be massive for them. I actually don't think they'll be in big trouble, Burnley. I do think with Kompany in charge, and once the players have bedded in a little bit, I do think they could maybe just become a side that's relatively settled, a bit like they were before, really. They had a bad season and went down, but before that, they were relatively settled and been in the Premier League a fair amount of time. I mean, one of the talking points is obviously the fact V for Villain says here it'll be weird playing against AJ. I wouldn't expect Aaron Ramsey to start for Burnley, but we could see him come on from the bench, and I feel like this happens quite a lot when a player moves clubs and then the next game is against their old team. I feel like it happens more often.
Surely they'd have said, do us a favour and don't play him in this game.
I don't think they do things like that anymore, I don't think those kind of things happen anymore.
No.
Remember when Fernando Torres played against Liverpool, like 3 days later or something? He was playing against Liverpool when he made that move to Chelsea.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. I can't see Ramsey starting this game, but I can certainly feel the presence from the bench. That's for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think it's too early to tell how Burnley are going to be this season. I mean, you think they might be fairly comfortable?
I'm basing this on. I'm a documentary person. I get carried away by documentaries, and I've seen Vincent Kompany on the documentary, and I've got.
He's
carried
impressive.
Away.
Yeah, he is extremely impressive. I was impressed with him when he spoke as a player. I was impressed when he's been at Burnley. He's one of those people that's able to, as you kind of alluded to earlier, he's able to communicate up and he's able to communicate down. That means he's communicating with guys in suits upstairs and communicating with 20-year-old blokes communicating down. So he's very impressive. I always have been. It's just the only question mark you have is the level of the players that they've brought in and whether they're able to sustain the style of play that they managed in the Championship and bring that into the Premier League. The comparison you make is with Brentford, who played a kind of heavy possession style in the Championship and played some really attractive football. And then when they came into the Premier League, they decided to switch that because they realised the level of play that they had was unable to sustain that in the Premier League against the extra level of quality. And they decided to target players who were, very physical and able to basically match it physically, but also have terrific pace. And Brentford targeted players with terrific pace, and they still have really, in order to kind of translate their style and change their style from a heavy possession style into a more counter-attacking transitional style. So the only question mark you have over Burnley is that we've not seen enough of them. We've not been able to gauge the level of play they have. But given what they did last season, you have to be impressed with what Vincent Kompany's done in coaching those players to the style of play that he has. And that is a good sign for Burnley, the fact that, Vincent Kompany's already shown that he's a very good coach.
I think you're talking about the physical attributes in a different way to what I'm about to say, actually. But that was one thing I noticed against Man City. Man City now at the back of Land of the Giants, were obviously playing with four centre backs, and then Rodri. They're a very physical side and a very good footballing side as well. Watching Burnley, that would be a concern for me if they are going to be in a relegation battle. That feel like they're not a big side. They're not a physical side. And actually, that would probably be a criticism I'd have of Villa at times as well. I think we can be a little bit meek when it comes to the battle. At times, I just looked at that Burnley team against Manchester City and thought that's a small team. That's not.
Yeah, and I think
even the goalkeeper's like a young goalkeeper coming through, isn't he? Really, James Trafford.
Yeah, I think that's probably why they targeted Sander Berge as well, to bring him in central midfield, because he's a very physical presence. But you're right; it'd be interesting to see how they stack up. But yeah, I think physicality. I don't know whether it's. Do you think it's been an issue with Villa?
I do think when Mings doesn't play, definitely I think we lack a bit of size, because who's the one clearing the ball when the corners coming and crosses coming? It's always Mings. Unless Diego Carlos is playing, we're not a massively physically big side. So I would say it's not a criticism. Emery knows more about football than I do. He'll have looked at everything in the summer and looked at what he needed, and we haven't brought in a physical player in the summer. He's kind of tried to bring in a player in each position. Really, he's brought in a really pacey forward who's an upgrade on what we had, a classy midfielder who can definitely compete. With Luiz and Kamara, and then he's brought in a different type of centre back to anything that we have. So if he thought physicality was a problem, I'm assuming he might have tried to address that in either in any of those positions. You'd have thought, but I do think it could end up being a problem with Mings. One thing I'll say about Man City against Burnley as well, set pieces could be important for Villa in this game, because they did not look good defending set pieces at all. Every set piece looked to worry, and Villa get their delivery right. I think that could be a real positive avenue for Villa in this game.
Yeah, and I mean, set pieces were important last year, weren't they? I think we had a bit of a roller coaster season really with set pieces last season, so it'd be good to have a good record this year. I think, and set pieces are going to be vital for Burnley as a newly promoted side as well. They have got to make sure that and that Vincent Kompany will be thinking, as a centre back himself, as a player, he'll be kind of leaping and trying to head every ball because he knows what it takes and what you need to do to defend in the Premier League. So in that sense, Burnley have got a good man in the dugout in order to try and help them out in that situation.
Yeah, just looking at a few of the comments. DJ Rozer's commenting on Twitch. I didn't even know we had a Twitch, so that's interesting for me to say. He's talking about Dean Saunders' debut against Liverpool must have been straight after Villa signed them. I've just seen Chad Villa Forever podcast saying I like Ezri Konsa at right back. I kind of think the way we're trying to play with the right back tucking in, Luca Dean's obviously probably going to play at left back at the moment. I do think playing maybe Carlos and having Konsa at right back, it suits the system more than having Cash be the one that tucks in, because it's just not his natural game at all. I'm not getting at Cash. I really like him. He's actually one of my favourite players. But if we're going to play that way, where Emery's talking about playing more with being three centre-backs in possession, Makes sense to keep Concert at right back, really, doesn't it? Especially in an away game, maybe in away games as well. When you look at how we got run over against Newcastle, maybe in away games in particular, that is the avenue to go.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that'll be in his thinking for sure, because he's brought in Pau Torres in order to give us that versatility. So I think there will be games where Consa starts at right back, and not just kind of away at Hibernian, with the greatest of respect, but I think in more important and against better sides as well, he'll be thinking about starting Ezri Konsa at right back. You're right. I mean, with Matty Cash tucking in as the right back / right centre back, you do lose a little bit of what he gives you going forward. But I also, I've been so impressed with him because he's taken on every kind of instruction that he's had, and he's worked really hard. I remember seeing an interview with him when Unai Emery came in, and he was like, the first thing I did when Emery got appointed was Google what he does with his fullbacks, and I was looking over exactly what he's done over his career with his fullbacks. So he'll have known what possibly could be asked of him, and I've been so impressed with him being able to take on the different roles, not only playing the kind of right back, right centre back, but also being able to be used as the flying wing back on the right hand side if he decides to play Pau Torres as the kind of left back.
He's filled in wide midfield. He ended the game against Everton actually playing as the right midfielder as well. And when we've tried to see out games, he's come on and played that position before. Cash is one who openly, I think, struggled when Emery first came in as well. I think he said he really struggled with what he was being asked to do. And I remember a few games when he was venturing past the halfway line, Emery throwing his arms up on the touchdown, not being happy. So he did definitely settled himself down, Cash. I'm not saying he can't play that, but I do think the plan was this season in certain games to have Torres at left back, and I think that's probably gone out the window now with the Mings injury. And in certain games to have Konsa at right back, and then maybe you'd have Moreno bombing forward. I can see Moreno playing some games as a wide midfielder, actually, and potentially Cash playing some games as a wide midfielder as well, because he did that loads at Villarreal, Unai Emery, particularly in Europe. So once we've got a bigger sample size, which seems to be my phrase of the day today, we'll know a little bit more about what Villa are going to do, I suppose, going through the season. Let's have a score prediction from you then, please, Dave Reid. And bearing in mind my record away isn't the best, I would get you to factor that in.
Okay. Bearing that in mind, I'm still going to plump for a victory, and I'm going to go for 2-1.
2-1 to Villa.
Prediction. Yeah.
I reckon it might be a draw, Got a feeling for a 1-1. This weekend. I do think this is a tougher game than perhaps people might think, because the Burnley fans were up for that first game back in the Premier League against Manchester City at home, but in the heart of hearts they'll have known this is a huge ask. It's a decent ask for them to beat Villa really at the start of their Premier League journey, but I think they'll be looking at this, and the fans will look at this and think they'll have looked at that Newcastle away game and thought there could be something to be had here. So much will depend on how Villa set up, but at least we're carrying a bit of momentum towards this game now with a couple of wins. Watkins has scored a hat trick in midweek, which is a positive, because that will.
And by the same token, Villa will have watched again that Newcastle game this week. I'm sure he will have sat them down and said, "This is not going to happen again this weekend." So I think there'll be a fire from the Villa side as well, not to have a similar outcome as there was at St James's Park.
Yeah, I'll tell you what we haven't mentioned actually. Zaniolo being available. We've not spoken about that. Again, I would be surprised if he started, but it will be an interesting option for Villa to have from the bench, because especially at the moment, attacking options from the bench are a little bit limited with the injury. So it's good to have him on board and available.
Yeah, you're right. I don't think he'll start. I think he would have featured on Wednesday if it hadn't been for the UEFA regulation. So I would expect to see him at some point on Sunday for sure. Yeah,
looking forward to that. He's a player I've always had an interest in. I can't say I've seen loads of him, but what I have seen of him in the past, I've always liked. Such a unique footballer. A 6'3" number 10 is not something you see very often in football, so it's definitely going to be interesting to watch him. Hopefully, we'll get to see a glimpse of him on Sunday. Thanks ever so much to Dave for joining me, and thanks to everyone who's tuned in. Even the one person on Twitch, as I say, I had absolutely no idea that we were on Twitch, and he's been sending some unreal emojis through the chat as well that I've been saying. So fair play, DJ Rosa, I think his name was. Absolutely brilliant stuff. And again, just a shout out again to Villain in Idaho. Go and find him on Twitter and give him. I'm saying him actually. I don't actually know that it's a him. So give them your support on Twitter. Yeah, and hopefully Villa will do something for you on Sunday. Right then, we'll be back with a post-match show at some point. Greg and I are definitely doing an 1874 pod on Monday. Greg's got something lined up for us, so that should be very interesting from what he said to me. So watch out for that. We'll keep you updated with the schedule on our social media pages. Have a good rest of the evening. I imagine most of you are going to bed. I know I am. And up the Villa.